Hello, sir.
Hello. We'll wait for the others to
Ay,
join
sir.
this
Sir,
meeting.
may tanong ako, sir.
Mamaya, antayin natin yung iba.
Ay, sige po. Ay, wag na pala. Wag na pala, sir.
Bakit wag na? Wala. We'll wait for the others to join this meeting. Okay. So the question of Jovert a while ago is about it's about the performance-based assessment. Sir, wala po bang performance-based assessment sa input-based education? Uh, the answer is when we look at the nomenclature, performance-based assessment, wala. Okay, there's no performance-based assessment in an input-based education. It's more of content mastery and not really of skills demonstration. Pumasok lamang si performance-based assessment nung nagkaroon ng outcomes-based education. Pwede siguro na meron, pero yung term na performance-based assessment ay hindi pa siya ganun katunog noong mga panahon na ginagawa ang content-based or input-based education. Okay? Now, when we say outcomes-based education, it clearly focuses and organizes everything in an educational system around what is essential for all learners. What is relevant? What is important for our learners now, for our today's learners? That's the foremost thing that outcomes-based education considers. Okay? Titignan niya kung ano ba dapat yung mga kakayahan na kailangang matuto ang aking mga mag-aaral nang sa ganon ay sa pamamagitan ng aming aralin ay maituturo ko sa kanila o mailililang ko sa kanila ang nasabing kakayahan o nasabing skills or competencies for them to have a successful learning experience. Okay, now, there are three basic premises of OBE or outcomes-based education. This outcomes-based education at the center, and there are three basic premises. First, OBE believes that all learners can learn and succeed. Lahat na mag-aaral ay mayroong kakayahang matuto at magtagumpay. Maybe not at the same pace, but all can learn and succeed. Unlike noon, na may mga guro magsasabi sa atin ng input-based education na, sadyang bobo yung batang yan, hindi na yan matututo. Tama? In the traditional classroom. But now in outcomes-based education, bawat mag-aaral ay mayroong kakayahang matuto at mayroong kakayahang magtagumpay. Nagkataon lamang na ang isang mag-aaral ay kailangan pa niya ng maraming learning activities bago siya matuto. Nagkataon din na may mga mag-aaral na mabilis matuto. So all can learn and succeed even if these learners are learning at different pace. Kaya nga, di ba, when in a traditional classroom, ang tawag doon sa mga magagaling ay gifted learners. Meron din tawag doon sa mga mahihina na problematic learners. Yan ang tawag natin noon. But in outcomes-based education now, we are no longer allowed to do that. We are no longer allowed to say that. Why? Wala na tayong tinatawag na gifted learners or fast learners. Wala na tayong tinatawag na slow learners or problematic learners. But now, learners are considered equally, are treated equally. Though in the 21st century, in outcomes-based education, meron tayong tinatawag na resource learners. What do you mean by resource learners? Ito yung mga mag-aaral na kailangan nila ng maraming resources, kailangan nila ng maraming suporta, ng maraming scaffolds, nang sa ganon ay matuto o matutunan ang mga bagay-bagay sa klase. Ganun lang naman. You know, I always believe that if students are not learning in our class, I believe that it's not just the fault of the learner, but it's also a fault that we have to point ourselves to as teachers. Naniwala ako na ang sukat, na ang tunay na sukat ng pagkatuto, ng pagtuturo ay pagkatuto. Ulitin ko yon. Ang tunay na sukat ng pagtuturo ay pagkatuto. Nothing has been taught. Nothing has been taught if nothing has been learned. Kung ikaw ay isang guro, hindi mo matatawag, hindi mo masasabi na nagturo ka kung walang natutunan ang mag-aaral mo sa'yo. Okay? Dahil kung walang natutunan na mag-aaral mo sa'yo, ano pang silbi na pumasok ka sa kanilang silid-aralan at nagsalita ng kung ano-ano. As we have said, learning is everywhere. There's lifelong learning. Our students, even if they will not be attending our class, will certainly learn something from their own experience. Now, we have to ask ourselves as teachers now, kapag papasok ba ako sa classroom ko, meron bang matutunan ng mga mag-aaral ko sa akin? O di mas maganda wag na lang silang pumasok, mag-absent na lang sila dahil mas marami silang matutunan sa bahay nila kasi may matutunan sila sa aking silid-aralan. Ulitin ko, bawat mag-aaral ay mayroong kakayahang matuto, mayroong kakayahang magtagumpay. Kaya hindi maganda na sabihin natin, wala nang ikakatagumpay ang batang yan dahil likas na bobo. That's no-no in outcomes-based education. That's the first premise. All can learn and succeed. The next one, success breeds success. Ito yung sabi ko kanina. If teaching is successful, so learning is. Kapag matagumpay ang pamamaraan ng pagtuturo mo, matagumpay din ang paraan ng pagkatuto ng iyong mga mag-aaral. Next, third, schools control the conditions of success. Okay? Ito, dito papasok yung what do we expect of our learners after attending our class, after completing our class? That's part of our control. As teachers and as members of schools, as frontline educators, we set our target. We set our expectations, our good expectations for our learners. You know, if your teachers expect a lot from you, if your teachers have high expectations of you, then that would mean na naniniwala ang guro na meron kang kakayahan na matuto at magtagumpay. Naniniwala siya diyan. If teachers do have high expectations of you. Pero kung ang teacher ninyo, wala man lang mababa expectation niya sa inyo, naniniwala siya na hindi kayo magtatagumpay. It's just a matter of believing or trusting your learners that they will certainly succeed, that they will certainly achieve academic success in your class. Klaro yung 3 basic premises? Okay. I assume that you agree with, I assume that you understood it because you are nodding your heads. Okay, next. Si Jobins ba, parte na ng klase? Parang wala si Jobins. Okay. RD, okay ka lang?
Yes po, sir.
Okay. Okay, OBE is characterized by the following. Outcomes-based education is characterized by the following. First, it is learner-centered. Because everything that we do in the classroom, everything that we do is directed towards our learners. That's learner-centered. Gone were those days. That instruction, that learning process is teacher-centered. Okay, kaya nga, di ba, nagpalit na tayo from objectives, nagpalit tayo ng learning outcomes to put learning, okay, to put learning as part of the nomenclature because everything has to be directed for students. That's learner-centered. Next, faculty-driven. Ano ibig sabihin faculty-driven or teacher-driven? The teacher, okay, the teacher should be able to be, should be motivated. Outcomes-based education motivates teachers, okay, to design learning that will be effective for students or for their learners. Next, quality-oriented. Dito papasok si assessment. Okay? That assessment, okay, assessment in OBE should help teachers and schools improve the way they deliver instruction, improve the way teachers teach, improve the way schools provide learning opportunities for students. That is quality-oriented. Kaya nga, later, in the final part of this semester, we will try to understand kung gaano kaganda o gaano kahalaga ang assessment para lalo pa natin pagbutihin ang ating pagtuturo o ang pagkatuto ng ating mga mag-aaral. That's quality-oriented. So these are the 3 characteristics of outcomes-based education. Any question? May mga tanong kayo?
Sir,
Okay.
paulit po yung sa quality-oriented, sir.
Ano ulit divine? Quality-oriented is, OB is quality-oriented because of its assessment part, because of its assessment component. When we say assessment, the way we measure or gauge our student or gauge student learning. And out from the result of the tests, the assessment, the learning activities that we ask our students do, okay, the result will serve later as basis for us to continually improve the way we teach and the way our learners learn from us. Okay, that's a good clarificatory question. Please take note that the implementation of OBE has to adhere to 4 principles. Okay, this is also part of our learning NEO LMS content. First is clarity of focus of significance. What do you mean clarity of focus of significance? Para saan ba? Bakit ba natin kailangan ituro ang learning content? Clarity of significance answers the question, why? Why should we teach this content? Why should this learning content be understood well by my students? Why should these activities be completed by my learners? That's clarity of focus of significance. It answers the question, why? Next, kapag nasagot mo na yung tanong na bakit, papasok ko na sa second principle. So ito pala ang dahilan kung bakit kailangan ituro ko itong learning content na ito. At dahil ito ang dahilan, ano gusto kong mangyari sa mga mag-aaral ko after teaching them this content? What do I want them do after after teaching them or after letting them learn this learning content? Okay, ano mangyayari sa mga mag-aaral ko? What will happen to them? What is the end goal that I have for my students? That's the second principle, designing down from where you want to end up. And number 3, ito ang gusto kong mangyari sa kanila, itong kakayahan ang gusto kong ma-develop sa kanila, yun yung number 2. Papasok tayo ngayon sa number 3. What are the activities? What are the learning tasks that I would ask them do for them to meet my end goal, for them to meet the learning outcomes? That is expanded opportunities. Alam nyo kayo, ito ha, marami ako man nakikita mga mag-aaral na nagreklamo kapag ang mga guro nila ay nagbibigay ng maraming mga activities. Reklamo ng reklamo, reklamo ng reklamo, without even realizing that the number of activities that teachers are giving to their students, okay, is actually a manifestation of how teachers are thinking of good learning tasks for students to be able to meet the learning outcome. Ang nakikita kasi natin lagi kapag maraming mga activities ang teacher, nakakapagod, walang konsiderasyon, bakit kailangan yung paggawa ang maraming mga activities na ito, hindi natin nakikita ng value ng activities. That activities are required for students to complete because the teacher believes that such activity would be contributory towards the attainment of the end goal of learning or the learning outcomes. Pero hindi natin masyado nakikita yun bilang mga learners. Una, nagrereklamo tayo kaagad kapag maraming binibigay ng guro. Okay? That's number 3, expanded opportunities for students to succeed. And last is high expectations for quality performance. Tama? You know, teachers have high expectations of you. Teachers have high expectations of you if in the very beginning or before you do the performance task, before you do the learning activities, ipipresent niya ang rubric, ipipresent niya kung paano kayo iskoran. Dahil yung rubric ang makakatulong sa inyo, for you to be able to produce a quality output. Okay? Nakikita ba natin iyon? Na kapag nagpagawa si teacher, pe-present niya yung rubric. Aba, rubric na naman, ang hirap-hirap. But that's one way that teachers are setting their high expectations of you. Kasi na-expect niya na ibinibigay ko ang rubric na ito, I am telling you the success indicators, the success criteria, the scoring guide, because this would guide you on how you are to submit or complete a quality output or a quality performance. But sometimes, most often, okay, students are not seeing that. Ang nakikita nila laging pahirap na lang si teacher. Hindi nila nakikita yung value kung bakit binibigay yung rubric para guide nila nang sa ganun ay magkaroon sila ng perfect score o magandang score doon sa activity. Okay? Ito, look at the picture. OBE should allow our learners love learning. Tama? OBE should allow our learners love learning. Sabi ng iba sa inyo, sir, I love learning, but I hate the teacher. Okay? Or, the other way around, I love the teacher, but I hate learning from him or her. That's the other way around, no? Okay? But you know, at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, sabi naman ng mga ibang teachers, o tama nga din naman na nasa atin din kung gusto nating matuto or hindi. Tama, nasa atin din kung gusto nating matuto or hindi. Okay? Ilan kayo sa klase dapat? Nasa 30 plus kayo, no? Okay, pero konti lang nakaka-attend ngayon. Okay? So look at this. This is a diagram explaining, that is a diagram explaining how OBE is implemented in a classroom level or at the classroom level. Okay? Allow me to explain it. Okay, how is OBE implemented at the classroom level? First, we identify the intended learning outcomes. We start from the end. At ba nakakalito? We start from the end. Ano yung ibig sabihin from the end? Isipin natin kung ano yung gusto natin mangyari sa ating mga mag-aaral after completing or after teaching or learning the learning content. Ano gusto kong mangyari sa kanila? And intended learning outcomes have to be anchored to the educational objectives. Anong pinagkaiba ng educational objectives sa learning outcome? Educational objectives is written using teacher's perspective or point of view. Usually, pag objective, kung ano yung gustong gawin ng teacher. Pag learning outcome, kung ano yung dapat gawin ng mag-aaral. Yun yung pinagkaiba ng dalawa. Di ba dati sa lesson plan, nilalagay objective? Okay? Na meron pang tatlong klase ng objective, psychomotor, cognitive, and affective. Psychomotor domain refers to skills, refers to performance that the students have to demonstrate or have to exemplify. Pag sinabi natin cognitive, ibig sabihin yung sa development of intellect. Pag sinabi natin affective, development of values or attitudes. Okay? These are educational objectives, usually written in a teacher's point of view or teacher's perspective. Pero kapag kapag learning outcomes, it's always directed. These are statements about things that we expect our students do. Okay? So for example, ang objective ni teacher ay define outcomes-based education. That is teacher's task. Teacher gagawa niyan. I'll define outcomes-based education. That's teacher's role. But out from that educational objective of defining outcomes-based education, ano intended learning outcome mo for students? That students will be able to or can explain what outcomes education is. So yung pinagkaiba ng dalawa. Objective is teacher's perspective. Learning outcomes is learner's perspective. Okay? Aba, na-define na ni teacher kung anong OBE. That's objective. Now, I have to, since I define ni teacher, then I should be able to know how to explain OBE. That is the learning outcome. At the end of the discussion, you should be able to define what outcomes-based education is. That is intended learning outcome. Okay? Now, for example, sinabi mo na intended learning outcome mo, objective mo. Ulitin ko ha, objective mo, define OBE. Outcome mo, explain OBE. Now, if I would like them explain OBE, what are the learning tasks or activities that I would ask them do? So for them to be able to explain OBE at the end of the lesson. So papasok na si step 2, identification of learning tasks or activities. Ano yung mga gawaing pagkatuto na kailangan nilang tapusin, na kailangan nilang gawin nang sa ganon ay lalo pa nilang maipaliwanag ng malaliman at ng malawakan ang kahulugan at katuturan ng outcomes-based education. O, ano natin pwedeng pagawa? For example, worksheet completion. Ano pa ang pwede nilang gawin? Okay, learning activities, classroom discussion. Okay, those are learning activities. What else? Okay, dito papasok yung mga learning strategies mo towards meeting the end goal, the learning outcome, which is for them to explain what OBE is. Now, the next step, identify assessment procedure. We have a separate discussion on this later. Assessment procedure. Ito yung pamaraan para makita mo, para masukat mo kung gaano nila nakamit ang learning outcome. Did they meet? Did they achieve the learning outcome? And you can only be able to answer that question if we do assessment procedures. For example, quiz. Okay? Performance assessment. You ask them do. You ask them create. You ask them create. You ask them to think of. You ask them to think of a learning outcome for a certain educational objective. Okay? That's assessment procedure. Okay, maliwanag ba yung yung implementation guide? Maliwanag ba? Mary Joy, okay ka lang? Miss Pasicolan, okay ka lang? Okay, good. RD, okay ka lang?
Sir, clarification lang.
Yes, Divine.
Sir, nandito kasi ako sa learning task saka sa assessment procedure. Yung pagkakaintindi ko sa learning task, yun ba mismo yung assessment, sir? Or dun sa assessment procedure yun?
Okay, that's a good question.
Yung mga quiz, ganun, sir.
Okay, good. That's a very good question. There's a thin line between assessment and learning tasks. All learning tasks may be considered as assessment. But not all assessment can be considered as a learning task. Okay? Kaya nga later, we will be discussing about the different forms of assessment. There's assessment for learning. There's assessment of learning. There's assessment as learning. And this one now, the learning tasks or activities are usually referred to as assessment as learning. Because you are doing assessment while students are learning from it. That's a difference. Now, later we will be discussing that. Ang pinagkaiba ng 3 types of assessment: assessment for learning, assessment of learning, assessment as learning. For example, to make it clear, when we do discussion, is it assessment or learning tasks?
Learning task.
It can be both. Okay, it can be both. It can be a learning task because you need discussion for you to prepare your students towards the achievement of the learning outcome. But It can also be an assessment if you will consider the quality of the responses of the students during discussion to gauge whether they are learning something. So pwede rin siyang assessment. Kaya nga, sa inyong requirement, ano yung requirement nyo rin explain ko sa inyo kanina, nung last meeting, you have to complete an online course on assessment with instruction or instructional planning with assessment. Kasi there's really a thin line between assessment and learning in an outcomes-based education. Okay, tatalakayin natin yan later, another separate session as regards assessment. Divine, medyo klaro na ba?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Divine, for asking these questions because it would really allow the team to advance our understanding of the lesson. Okay. Now, we now proceed to beyond traditional OBE is transformational OBE. And the father of OBE is no other than Dr. William Spady. Okay, he's the father. O lumalabas ito sa LET exam. Who's the father of OBE? It's William Spady. Okay? Now William Spady said, success in school is of limited benefit unless students are equipped to transfer that success to life in a complex, challenging, high-tech future. In Filipino, ika niya, ang tagumpay sa paaralan ay limitado para sa mga mag-aaral hanggat hindi nabibigyan ng pagkakataon ang mga mag-aaral upang ilapat ang nasabing tagumpay sa kanilang buhay. Buhay na komplikado, buhay na maraming mga pagsubok at buhay na masyadong komplikado ang teknolohiya. If we do not know how to apply all the things that we learn in school, in our everyday living, then success would merely be a word. Then success would merely be just a term or just a noun and not a verb. Tama? Kung hindi natin naturuan ang ating mga mag-aaral na ilapat ang kanilang mga natutunan sa pang-araw-araw na buhay nila, edi ang tagumpay ay isang pangalan lamang at hindi pandiwa. Success would merely be a noun and not verbs. Okay? So I'm also expecting you that in a way after this discussion, you could be able to distinguish, okay? Or you could be able to a bit apply OBE in your learning activities, especially this online learning. Dapat every week meron din kayong learning outcome. Dapat within the week, matapos ko lahat ng worksheets na ibinigay sa lahat ng klase ko. And that is a learning outcome. Anong gagawin ko? Nang sa ganun ay makumpleto ko. Yun yung learning tasks. Maaga ako magising. Kailangan nakaligo ako bago ako mag-start. Nang sa ganun ay kampante ako, komportable ako habang ginagawa ko lahat ng online activities ko. Dapat lagi ako nagche-check ng aking LMS kung meron mga pinost na bagong mga activities or hindi. Tapos magtatanong ako sa teacher ko kung hindi klaro sa akin. These are all your learning activities. Kapag magawa ko itong mga tos within the week, certainly I'll be able to complete all learning tasks, all worksheets in my LMS. That is an actual example of OBE. Okay, in your own, sa inyong sarili-sariling mga buhay-buhay. Okay? Now, what is transformational OBE? Transformational OBE is outcome defined, not calendar defined. Transformational OBE is outcome defined and not calendar defined. Ano ibig sabihin nito? It's about meeting the outcomes. It's about Transformational OBE is about achieving the outcomes, achieving your end goal, and not merely just completing the activities, as they are calendared. Kasi kahit na kinalendar mo yung mga yan at nagawa mo yung mga activities na nakakalendar, kung hindi mo naman na-meet yung outcome and you failed to demonstrate, you failed to achieve the end goal of why you do these things, then that's not transformational OBE. Okay? Outcome has to be achieved. That's OBE. Ang calendar defined, hindi siya OBE, hindi siya transformational OBE. This is a traditional OBE. Ang focus ng transformational OBE, outcomes have to be achieved, have to be attained. Next, transformational OBE is expanded in opportunity, not constrained. Ibig sabihin, there are many activities, several learning tasks are given to learners for them to meet the outcomes. Hindi lang nag-discuss with teacher, but the students are given the opportunity to brainstorm in teams. Hindi lang lecture ang ginamit ni teacher, but the students are given the opportunity to at least make use of other references. Okay? It's not constrained. Hindi yung, pag sabi mong constrained na, okay, itong textbook lang ang gamitin natin, walang ibang librong gagamitin. Constrained kapag sinabi ng teacher na, ito lang ang dapat gawin, wala nang iba. Constrained kapag sinabi ng teacher na wala kayong karapatan magdagdag ng mga activities. Kung anong gusto ko, yun lang ang gawin ninyo. That's constrained. But in transformational OBE, it has to be always expanded in opportunity. Kung kailangan magdagdag na activities, then we do it. Basta makakatulong ang activities na ito for students to learn something, for students to meet the learning outcome. Okay? Next, transformational OBE is based on performance credentialing, not custodial. Ano yung isang performance-based? Nakadepende doon kung kaya ng estudyante na ilapat yung kanilang natutunan sa actual na pangyayari. That's performance-based. Ang custodial, ibig sabihin ng custodial, you do this, you do that, or else or not. Okay, ganun si teacher, di ba, pag custodial, custody, okay, binabantayan lagi ang estudyante na dapat perfect ni estudyante, na dapat ganito ang gagawin ni estudyante. Okay? Parang hindi pwedeng mag-introduce si estudyante ng panibagong paraan para magawa yung bagay. Ito, ang custodial, ibig sabihin ng custodial, ganito. You solve this math problem gamit ang equation lamang na ito. That's custodial. Pero si teacher performance-based siya kapag sinabi niya, you solve this problem in any equation that you want to use as long as you will get the right answer. That is performance. Okay? Ang traditional learning usually custodial. Kung anong gusto ko gawin nyo, sundin nyo, and others. Okay? Next. Transformational education, okay. Since magta-time na, mag-end ng ating meeting, okay, we will continue this next meeting, ha? We will continue this next meeting, okay, because it's already 1 minute. Let me just remind you of the following. We'll continue it next meeting. Saglit lang. Do not leave yet, saglit lang.
Di ka namin iiwan, sir.
Oo, huwag niyo ako iwanan. Nakakatakot maiwan.
Kasi alam namin yung feeling na nasasaktan.
Wow, di wow ka.
JJ.
Ha? Amen? Okay. Allow me to share yung sa LMS natin.